Welcome back, guys. Today we have a .NET 6 web API for you guys, and we're going to be adding JWT or JSON web tokens as its way of authenticating. So I'm going to go through kind of the way that you would use it in a web app or a website, as in you're going to have a way to register new users, and then you're going to have a way to log in. And once the user logs in, they're going to get this token, and then that token is going to give them access to anything that's restricted on the server or the API or whatever. And then I'm also going to show you guys kind of how you set the attribute or the tag so that the API knows to let this person through because they do have the appropriate token. So first, let's dive into what is JWT, or what is a JSON web token. A JWT is a compact and self-contained way to transmit information between parties as a JSON. The information can be verified and trusted because it is digitally signed using a secret or a public and private key. They are commonly used for authorization on request once the user is then logged in. The token is in the request, and then it is allowed to access routes, services, and resources. Mainly, it's in the request header through the authorization as kind of bearer, and then the token, but we'll see that later. The typical structure is of three parts: the header, payload, and the signature. When a user logs in, a JWT is returned. You must store them securely, and when you want to make a call to a protected route or resource, include the JWT in the authorization header using the bearer schema like I just mentioned. JSON is less verbose, and it is simple to sign, and JSON can be mapped to objects very easily, and JWT is easy to work with on the client side. And here you can see one example. So you see kind of how I said a little second ago that it's kind of three parts. So you see there's the red part, a dot, purple part, dot, and then the blue dot. So those are the three things I just mentioned. So quickly, I want to tell you guys how to store the JWT on the client side. It's good knowledge for you if you're creating the backend, you know how it's going to be interacted with, or if you also kind of handle both sides. So first of all, try not to store it in local storage because it can be easily read with a cross-site scripting attack. You do not want that. And then you want to store them in HTTP only cookies if possible. This is a special cookie that's never stored on the client side, and it's only ever sent with the server with the request. So now let's actually dive into the project so I can show you guys how to set all of this up, get that login, a register, show you guys how to actually put the token so that it's actually kind of needed to be read to access these certain endpoints. So let's get into it. And if you guys find this video helpful, please drop a like on this video to help it reach more developers, and subscribe so you don't miss any more content here, and follow me on TikTok at israelquiroz93 if you haven't. But now let's dive into the project. And if you guys want to go check out the code, it's going to be on my GitHub, so just check out the link in the description. Now that we actually have Visual Studio open, we're not going to create the project. So we're going to click the .NET Core Web API right here. We're going to go through. I'm going to call it JWT App YouTube. So we're going to do that. Click next. We want .NET 6, obviously. Configure for HTTPS. That's good. And then everything else is fine. Let's create it. Now that we have this created, I want to first just get rid of kind of these defaults, the weather forecast defaults. When you create a project, I'm going to delete all of that stuff. I don't need it. Same thing with this controller, weather forecast, delete all of that. We don't need that. That's not the example I'm doing. So first thing I want to do is I want to create first a models folder, because I'm going to need at least a few models here. So I'm going to create this models folder. And then in my controllers, I'm going to need at least two controllers. So one is where we're going to do kind of the authorization. And with that, I mean, or authentication. It's going to be the login and the register methods are going to be in here, and where we're going to be handling the tokens. And then I'm going to create one for just items, which is going to be kind of the one demo get request, where I just want to show you guys how you can detect and then use that JWT token when we have it to, you know, either let someone in to actually hit an endpoint or stop someone from hitting an endpoint. So I'm going to then create those controllers and then continue. So first, like I mentioned, we're going to create this auth controller. It's going to be an empty auth controller. We're going to create an item controller as well. We're going to need both of those. Items controller. So now the items controller is just going to contain one method. The auth is going to have all the registration, login, and stuff. And then in my models, I'm going to end up having three different models. The first model that I'm going to have is I'm going to have a login model. This is going to be the model that we use whenever someone is going to be logging into the application. This model is just going to be pretty straightforward, nothing crazy. It's just going to be a username and a password. What do you usually do whenever... let me add this, which is a data annotations, because it's required, because we want a value. But again, what do we use whenever you're logging into anything? A username and a password. Straightforward stuff, man. So we are now going to need some model for when we are registering, because when you register, it's a little different, because usually when you register, you want to do like maybe a username, a password, but then you also maybe want to confirm that the password they typed is correct. So you make someone type it in twice. So I am going to have a slightly different model just for that. And then in here, we are just going to have a username, a password, and then the confirm password. And let's put the data annotations into here as well. Now that I have the register model completed, I now want to create a model for my user. So the user is going to have 3 fields, and I'm about to explain what they are all for. The user needs extra fields because it has a password, but in the real world, we cannot just save passwords in our database as plain text. It's a huge security risk. So you want to be using encryption algorithms to make sure that you don't ever have just plain text passwords in the database. So you're going to be using some type of hash encryption, some cryptography algorithm or library. So just look for those. And I'm going to show you an example of the one that I use. But this is going to be, so the salt is basically appended symbols, numbers, text to your password. And then you're going to want to encrypt it using some, hash. And then it ends up looking nothing like the original plain text password that you typed in. And then you're going to use the salt and that hash to then compare it to whatever someone types in as their password when you log in. And then based on do they end up matching up, and we're going to see that in a second, do you grant someone the token and, access by logging them in successfully. So now let's continue on. So now that we have the 3 models that we're going to need, I now want to create kind of my one get request that I'm going to have here. And my one get request is going to be very simple. And it's, again, just going to be to prove that by using the JWT token, we can kind of allow access or not allow access. This is basically what's going to say, hey, check the authorization. Is that token valid? And does it have to go with the rules that we state in our program.cs? If so, let them through. If not, or is it not there, kick them out. So what we're going to have here is just going to be a very simple method. Going to put everything in here so we can just see it. So very straightforward. We're just gonna have a list of colors. That's gonna be kind of our secure data that we don't want to allow the person to access if they're not authorized. And it's just gonna be a get color list. You're gonna hit this method. It's just gonna return this list of colors, and we're gonna protect it behind this authorize. But if we comment this out, we should be able to run this. We're gonna see it, and we should be able to just in Swagger quickly try it out. So if we see it here, we want to try it out. We execute it, gives us back our list. So it's working, but obviously we're not getting an error. But if I were to put this back, it would give us that there is no authorization schema, but we're going to add that in later. I just want to finish up with this controller, and now let's move on to the actual auth controller, and let's begin with the registering. Now that we have everything done with the items controller, now let's get into the auth controller and create the register method for when we are registering a new user. So this method's going to look just like this. Now we have this. So now we actually need to return something or create something. So with that, we're first going to create our user object. So this is going to be the new user that we will be kind of building. And first of all, we, get a username. That's going to be the very first thing. Model.username. Boom. Okay. But now we have the big boy problem. We're going to have to handle the passwords. And this is where we're actually going to go into computing the hash. So first, we start with the model.confirm password, which is the second password that someone would type in. And then we're going to compare it to the password. Is it the same? If so, then let's go ahead and actually do the kind of hashing. If not, that means that they messed up and we need them to do it again. So with this, it's going to basically just say that the passwords don't match, and that's just the indicator to whoever that was to redo it. But now let's come back here, and this is what we're going to be doing for hashing. So if they did do it correctly, we now need to import these cryptography libraries. Cool, everything should be fine here. Okay, so now this is the code that we're actually going to use to encrypt. So we're going to use this algorithm right here. It actually gives us a key, which we're also going to store as a salt, and then we're going to have our password hash, and we're going to pass in the password that they gave us that they want to, register their account with, pass it into here, compute the hash, and then we're going to save that. So a user is then going to have, their username, a password salt, and password hash, and those, byte arrays are going to be actually storing in our database. And then now, once we have that, we're going to go back to our user list that I need to create, because that is what it is. Let's do this, and then let's add the user in here. Now let me go right up here. Boom. So that's our list that we're going to be appending to whenever we create and register. And then this is going to be our kind of mock database. So just for the sake of not having a full-on SQL database for this project, for this example, this is essentially kind of what we're doing right now as our fake database. But essentially right here, you would want to go create that object. You wouldn't just want to keep it in a list, right? So then, okay. And we're just going to return the user. Blah blah, so that we know that it was created and 200 successful. So now if I go inside of here, let's run it and let's see what the result is. So we have our register. Let's say our username is string, password string, confirm string. Let's try it out. Execute. So you see as our response body is 200, our username is string, our password is the salt, password salt, and our password hash. So we see that both of them got successfully encrypted, and we got the key and then it got encrypted. And now let's just see if it was an error. If we get this, now execute with this, and we see that the passwords don't match, error 400. So this correctly worked as well. So now let's move on to the next part. Now we have a registered user. Now let's make them log in. So now let's create our login method. So first of all, it's going to be another HTTP post. Boom. So it's going to be a login method with the login model. And now the first thing we're going to do is we need to go to our user list, and based on the username, hey, does this person even exist in our database? Does this person exist? Does his username match at all? Because that's going to be kind of the first thing we're going to look. Does the username match at all? And if it doesn't match at all, then we're just going to give kind of a more cryptic message. I think it's something that's done very commonly on the front end. If you go to a lot of different websites or blah, 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 when you're trying to sign in, it's kind of just like username or password wasn't valid, to kind of not give a hint of which of the two was actually wrong. So kind of if we don't find the username and type it in, we're just going to tell you one of the two was wrong. Keep trying. But now we're going to actually need the check password method. This one's the one that's going to return a bool whether the password that the person typed in is correct. Because if it's wrong, we want to again tell them, hey, one of these two is wrong. We don't want you to know which one, but you can still log in. But if they do match, if it is a correct password with the stored password, then we want to give them their JSON token. How we're going to look for that is we're going to do first this var. I'm just going to call it match. It's basically just going to be a Boolean that's going to say, did it match or not? And then we're going to do this check password method. And in this password method, we're going to pass in the model password. And then we're just going to pass in the user. So we get all their stuff. I'm going to just create this, generate this method right here. It is just going to be a private bool that we want to get back. And then I want this bool result. So this bool result is what I'm going to return based on the result. And we're just, again, going to be using something very similar to what is right here, except we are going to compute the hash, and then we are going to compare values. That is going to be the difference here, and let me explain. So what's happening here is we again are using the same algorithm that we used down here, but we are passing in the salt. Why? Because we want to use the exact same key that we used for the original hash. Why do we do this? Because if we have the same key, that means it's going to hash to the same value. If we give it the same original matching password, they'll hash to the same thing using that key. If not, we would use an indeterminate new key, and we would never be able to validate, are these two going to be the same? So we have to pass in the stored salt that we used originally when registering, and then we're going to compute the hash for the password that they are trying to log in with, and then we just compare them. And then we're going to get a result, and it's going to be either true or false. And then we're going to return this result. And once we return this result, now we want to check, hey, was there actually a match? Was there actually a match here? Because if not, we're again just going to wink, wink. We're going to tell you the username or password was wrong. But we know on the back end that it's because the passwords were off using this right here. But now let's say, hey, you did give me the right password. So now we have to give you this token. So how do we create a token now? Let's show you. So the way you can create a token to then return to the user to then be able to authenticate whatever other endpoints they want to hit is by starting with this var token handler. This is what we're going to create first. And our new JWT security token handler. And then we are going to probably need to import we're going to need to install the system identity model token to JWT. This is Microsoft's way of implementing JWT tokens. It's, integrated. It's probably the easiest way to do it, and it's very straightforward. And there's a lot of other examples other than just mine. But that is the way I'm going about doing this. So then my var key, we're going to do some encoding here. So once we've gotten the JWT security token handler and we've imported the right, library, so now we are going to do this key. We're going to need to encode and get the bytes. But here we're going to need to access our application settings, our app settings. So you're going to need to have a secret in there, and let me show you. So you're going to need to have this secret here, and it needs to be just some message. It doesn't have to be anything crazy, but it needs to be a string of a certain length. So you need to have your secret, some secret message for the token, because then this is used within your token. So, and then also other than this, we do need to add our app settings to our actual program so that it knows that we are going to then use this in the controller, because if not, we're going to have some issues. So we do need to add this in. So we're adding it in here. And I do need to create an app settings file so that we know that within our app settings, we're going to have our secret. So we need to kind of give it the shape of this JSON right here. So let's go ahead and create that as well. So I now went ahead and created this app settings model. It's just going to create the secret. That's just so it knows the structure. So the project knows the structure of this, that it is going to kind of be app settings and then inside the secret. And we're just giving it kind of the shape so that we can then include it out here in this side. And now we know that our application settings and app settings, and then we can access this service in our controllers to then use. So now going back to our auth controller, we can now add this secret right here, but we need to add this into the top of our model. We need a constructor and we need this variable here. So I quickly am adding in that we need to, let me import options here. So what have I added in now? So to be able to access the app settings secret, which is this right here that we need for this key, I made a constructor. This constructor is going to be obviously for the auth controller. And then I've added the app settings here, injecting them into here so that we have access to those values. So now we've created our key here. The next step to this is we do need our token descriptor. And for that, we need to use a security token descriptor. Let me add this tokens library. And now here is where you get a lot of different options of how you want to do things. This is kind of what I have, but there's obviously a lot of different changes and different ways you can go. So for a subject, the subject I'm giving you, so I'm letting you know that you are the subject, and I'm assigning you the claim based on your username that you have. And then I'm going to tell you, and at this point you can play around with how long you want things to expire, how long you want a token to be active. Do you want it to be every time you log, every time do you have to log in once you close an application? Is there going to be a certain set of days that we're going to allow a token? You can kind of play with the expiry date. I'm just putting for this one 7 days. And then again, what did I tell you guys at the beginning of this video? Why are they secure? It's because you sign your tokens so that we know that it's a trusted authority that is handing you this token to access their site. So that is what we're signing it with again. And we're assigning it to you, and we're telling you how long. And there's a lot more things that you can do in here, but that's kind of the basis. And now the next two things is basically just to create this token, and that's going to be our var token. We're going to create this token, and then we're going to write it to you, and that's going to officially actually serialize and encrypt the token, and then you're going to have it ready to go. And now the last is we are going to return to you this token. So now let's see the register and the login in action. So let me show them to you. I'm going to put a breakpoint here in login so we can kind of step through it together. And I'm going to do one in register as well, because I kind of want to step through and explain and just kind of show you guys what is going on here before we jump to the final part of this video. So I'm actually going to use Postman for this, and I want to test with Postman. It's a little bit better to use, I think, than Swagger. So let's do that. Okay, so our API is running, and now I'm going to call the register method. So the register method is going to, again, like we said here, it is going to be a username, password, confirm password. Those are going to be the two things. And as long as the confirm and password and the username are all good, then it's going to run. So we're just going to go straight up, just string, string, string. We just want it to go through. And we do that. It's going to send the request. We're going to hit here. We see string to string. Steps through. When it goes through, we're going to see that for our salt is going to be a byte array. Same with our hash. another byte array. We're going to step through. It's going to add it to the user list. And now we have our one user registered, right? So let's continue. And now we want to log in. So if we want to log in, we again have our login with our body JSON, username string, password string. And now we should be awaiting a token or a username like you see down here. Let's actually run it now. We're going to see that we're going to step through. Our model correctly hit string. It should find a user. So we do have an object, so it's not going to be null. And now we're going to check the passwords. Our match already came back as true. Why? Because it was string and it was string, and they're going to match. And now we're going to step through here. Now let's step through. It's creating our token here. And we should see down here that we already have this token. You see the same structure that I mentioned earlier in the video where it's kind of the 3-part dots. You can see very clearly right here the little dots, the little periods defining. And then we go through all the way and we see that it returns us this token right here. And now with this token, this is key because this token, like I mentioned earlier, is what you're going to kind of store having whatever cookie that you want to use, because on your client side, this is now what you want to be appending to all the requests that are going to be going to the server, to the API, because that token is your access to the data or whatever you need to show on the front end. But before we do that, we need to set and tell the application what authorization method we're even using. If I try and right now give it this token, it's not going to know what to do, because in the services, when the application is, booting up, getting going in the program, I haven't told it what type of authorization we're doing. So let's go do that, and then we'll come back and we'll create a new user and we'll use a new token. So back in our program.cs, we now need to add JWT as a form of authentication. So how are we going to do this? Easy. First of all, we need to add authentication. So we need to do builder services dot add authentication. So with this, we now need to add this lambda expression. We're going to have the default default authentication scheme. And that's going to be that we're going to be using JWT bearer defaults. And I think we're going to need to import something. Yes, we're going to need to install the ASP.NET Core Authentication JWT bearer package. So let's install that. Now that that is installed, we should be able to put the authentication scheme here. And then same thing for default challenge scheme. We're going to use the exact same thing. And then once we have that, we now need to add the JWT bearer. And with the added JWT bearer, we're going to need to add a few more. And I need to create a little variable so I can access, again, the app settings file here to then know that when we're signing the key, we're again going to be using our secret message. And with that, we're requiring HTTP database that is false. We're going to save the token, and then these are our token validation parameters. And again, there are more parameters and different things you can do here other than just validate the user. And you can change all of these different settings, but this is essentially how you tell your application that we are using a JWT token. And then all we have to do as well is add authorization and authentication down here, which I just kind of copied over. And now we should be able to successfully hit this items controller, and this will successfully authorize us to go through. And we'll see with and without this, just to kind of make sure that it's actually doing something, right? So let's go back into the application and let's run it. Now with our application running again, let's now test Postman and let's go all the way through and get our token. So first of all, let's begin with the register. It's going to stop here. Let's go through. We want it to go through because obviously our user list gets wiped every time we start the project up again. We see everything worked here. Let's now log in again. And let's just step all the way through. And we should be getting our token here. So now, once we get our token, I'm going to copy this. And in here, I already have, I need to change this from a previous example. So 7274, get color list. So we're going to go in here in the headers. We set the content type as application JSON. And now let me copy over here and paste my new token. So we set our authorization bearer, and then we're setting our token here in the header. Like I mentioned earlier, that's how you do it. So now what we want to do is now we run this, and we successfully hit it. Blue, red, green, yellow, pink. That is the list that the item controller gives you back right here. And if you want to see it again in action and that it did successfully go through, you see we're going through here, boom, and we got it. And now if you want to see that it didn't work, so let's say we don't include this token. So let's get rid of the token. And we're going to say 401 unauthorized. That's saying that we are not allowed and not authorized because we do not have our token to actually get in and see this, the values, this list, our data, whatever. We're not authorized because we didn't give it the right token and it's blocking it. But that's it, guys. That is basically how you handle and create a JWT token, showing you kind of here how to register those users. And then once you log in that registered user and can prove that they exist already, then you hand them that token and they now have access to your server. And then that authorized tag, like I'm showing you guys here, you can put those on whatever controller you need to keep secure. Obviously, you would not put that on a register method. You would not want authorized there because you want any user to be able to hit that. Same with your login. You wouldn't put it there, but anything else that's secure and you want to protect, you would then put that authorized. If you want to do policies, claims, that's for a future video. And we're going to do that, which is even more restrictions on what people can add based on, other types of clearances. But with that, that's it. And so now you have JWT tokens and a few endpoints and a good base structure. And now you can build this up to wherever you want to go. So now the next part is choosing what video to watch next. Well, you can try and put your API into the repository pattern to give it a nice structure, or I can teach you how to unit test properly your API using autofixture or mock. Choose your own adventure, and I'll see you guys at the next video.